Hello, this is Christian here. In this video, we'll be talking about the switch case statements in PHP. First of all, we'll take a look at the syntax for the switch case statements. The switch case statements is sometimes just called the switch statements in most languages and also in PHP. It is very similar to a series of the if, else if statements and the if statements. Again, the term if statements is referred to all of the above, all the if else, and if else if statements. And the switch statements is used to compare the same expression when you have many values to compare to. So this is a perfect example of how the lottery numbers are drawn from, the jar or a box or whatever. In that scenario would be a perfect example. And so, for example, if you check a variable, and you want to know if the variable's data type is one of the following. It could be, is it a string, an integer, a double, a boolean, or object, or any other types. Okay, so it's a perfect example for that. So the switch case statements has the syntax for that. The keyword switch followed by parentheses. Inside the parentheses is the expression. You must have an expression, otherwise it won't work. And you must have a pair of curly braces. Unlike the if statements, you must have it. Okay, and then the cases in there, these are all optional. It can be an empty switch statements, but usually you have something in there. Otherwise, what's the point of having a switch statement, right? So you would say case is a keyword followed by the value, and that value is the value based on the expression. So let's just say if the expression is a number, then you would check the number. What type of number is it, right? What exact value are you comparing to? If it matches the case value number 1, then the statements in that value or that case will run until it reaches the break statement. In that case, it will exit out of the switch case block. So I have case values 1 followed by a colon, then the statement or statements followed by the word break, and then you would case 2 and all the way to case n. And the default, as you can see, is very similar to the else clause of the if else statement, and it's completely optional. You don't have to do that, you don't have to use it, but if it's something that you want to catch all, then that is very good to have. And the keyword break down there at the very end, it's completely optional because there's no more statements after that, so there's no point. Now the break keyword there is important because if you don't put it there, that means it's going to flow automatically to the next case, and you may not want that. In certain situations, you will want that, and we'll show an example of that in a future video. So here is an example of a switch statement. So I want to switch the secret number. It's a variable. We don't know what the number is. It's just an arbitrary number or a number that is, entered by a user in a web form. And so you check the number to see if, let's just say you're playing magic number. If it's a 1, then you put a message saying higher, right? Tell the user to go higher, and then they'll guess it again. If it's a 5, then go lower. If it's a 3, then they get the correct number. If it's anything else than any of these 5 values, then that will fall into the default, and they get a message saying it's too far off from the magic number. Okay, something like that. So let's make a note here again that PHP is a dynamically typed language. That means all these case values can be of any type. Okay, in a strictly typed or a statically typed language, these case values must be of the same type as the secret number, for example. They cannot be different type. But PHP and JavaScript and Python, they don't really care. So be very cautious when you do this kind of statements. So let's go into the code editor and see some examples. Okay, so here in the IDE, I'm using PHP Storm. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this just switch statements. Okay, so the syntax for that is really just switch. And what are you switching? What are you comparing here, right? So you can put a number if you want, like 5, because this is just expression. If you remember the term expression, or it is really just anything, any value, right? Anything that has value is an expression. This could also be a value like 5, greater than 10. So you have a Boolean type. So down here will either just be true or false, basically, right? So whatever this evaluated to you will compare those in the cases value down here. So in this case, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I'm going to go into here and use a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called here. Again, we'll call it the secret number. Okay, we'll give it a 3, like an example in the slide. And then we'll switch this secret number. So basically, it's like, okay, you reach your hand into a jar of numbers, and you pick the number is a 3, and or whatever it is, right? And you compare the number to see if the number matches your secret number, which is the one that you want. You want to call. I mean, so for example, let's just say this is, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Okay, so secret number is 3. That's our secret number, but this is we call this is the guess number. Okay, the guess number, and we don't know what this is. So let's just say that the guess number was entered by the user and it happens to be a 2. Okay, so if this guess number matches our secret number, then they found the magic number. Okay, so let's just hear case 1. If it's a 1, then we want to put a message. Here I will put a message variable. First, I'll just leave it blank. And if it's a 1, then we want to assign the message to say higher, go higher, and we'll break that. Okay, and then if it's a 2, then we want to say, give it, a better clue, a little higher, right? It's getting close. And then again, we'll break that. So I'm just going to go and press Control D, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so if it's a 3, this is our secret number, for example. Then you would say correct, something like that. If it's a 4, then you say a little lower. And if it's a 5, you can say lower. And if it's everything else, then we'll put default here, and we'll put a message saying too far off. So they know that it's too far away. And the break, again, here is optional. You can put it here if you want, but it's really optional. You don't have to put it there. So then down here, then we can echo the result, which is basically the message, what the message is going to be. It's going to be one of these. Okay, it can't be blank because we have the default here. If you don't put a default here, then yeah, it can be blank, because if it doesn't matches any one of these, then the default will be displayed down here. Okay, so for now, let's just save this file and run it. So I'm going to the terminal here. Again, I'm going to clear this from the previous slide screen. I'm going to go to the file switch statements. So PHP switch statement. Hit enter, and you see that it's just a little bit higher because let's just our guess number was a 2. So it matches a 2 and goes a little bit higher. Okay, if you go to 1, now it should say higher, right? It just say higher down here. And if I pick exactly 3, then it should match that exact number. And you have it correct. Okay, and so if I put like a 0, for example, is none of the above, then I should get this message saying it's too far off. Okay, so we get too far off. Okay, now there is a reason why I put a number here, right? So usually you put a variable here because you can always replace it very easily. And so down here I could put, instead of 3, you put case the secret number. So this can be a variable number if you want, because after all, the value of this guess number can be matched to either the secret number, which is a 3, or anything else. Again, PHP is a loosely typed language, so you don't have to have the same data type here. Whereas if it's a strictly typed language like Java, these have to be exactly same type as the number or the value or the expression in here. Okay, so this is how you would create a switch statement. As you can see here, notice I put everything here in a single line. Okay, the reason why I do this is because this is really short, so that's fine. But notice that you are not limited to just a single statement here. you can have a 2 lines, 10 lines, or 100 lines of code in this block. So that means when you get to the point, then it makes a lot of sense to pull this into multi-line like this. Okay, and notice again, you don't put that curly braces here. You don't have to. You can if you want, but it's not required. Okay, so you can leave it out, and it would know based on the syntax. Okay, just make sure you put a colon here. If you put a curly brace here, it's an error. Okay, so colon and then the message and then the statements here followed by the break. So if you don't put a break here, if I happen to take that out, okay, what it'll do is that it will leak to the next message by default, even though it doesn't match a 2. If you match a 1, it's going to leak to the next case and run this and this together. Okay, so for example, if I save this, if I put a 1 here, it's going to match the 1, so it's going to go into the 1's part and print this message, and there's no break. Then this case here will be completely ignored, and it's going to treat this whole block of code here as if it belongs to this case of 1. Okay, so be very cautious when you do this. So let's go to the terminal, and let me clear the screen, and let's run this state code. So as you can see, it actually didn't print this message out, and the reason why, but you did see that it's this little littler, it should say little higher, but anyways, so it prints the little higher message, which is this one here. It did not print this message. You may wonder why. This is what's called a logic error. I didn't realize this, but I just caught it now. And the reason why is because this message initially it was higher, but then down here it replaces that with a little higher. And I should have fixed this. This is not doesn't make sense. Okay, so let's try it again. So again, you see the message a little higher, right? So this was higher, but then now this takes over that. Okay, had I done this, if I put like a plus, the dot here to concatenate, then you will see that it has higher and then a little higher altogether in a single string down here. Okay, let's save this and do it again down here. So here we go. You see the first time it goes into the first case, it gets the message or the string of higher, which is this part here. And because I did not put any carriage return in there, it will just keep continuing on with the string. The next thing is concatenating, right, this string to this one, so you get higher, little, and then higher. Okay, so it completely ignored this case. What if I put case 2? Well, if you put case 2, then yeah, it's going to go match case 2, and it will just get a little higher. Okay, because that's just the normal case block there with the break. So that is why you need to put a break here. Again, sometimes you don't have to. You may not need it for various reasons. But most of the time you do put a break here just to make sure that it doesn't leak to the next statements down here. Okay, so that is the case statement. Now you will see that sometimes you may be very tempted to do something like this. So guess number is, in this case, is 2. Instead of 1, you may say something like, if the guess number, like guess number, this is irregular, but it's doable. Guess a number is, maybe something like, maybe not 1. Yeah, let's just say 1. You can put conditional statements down here too if you want. You shouldn't be doing this, but you can. Some languages don't allow you to do it. For example, Java, you cannot put conditional expressions down here other than just the actual values. But PHP, you can. It doesn't really care. So the guess number could be a 2. You can say if guess number is equal to 1, or you can do like or. You learned that before from the previous units. You say or guess number, maybe something like, how do I say this? Maybe like divisible by 2. I know it doesn't make sense, but I'm just going to show you that you can do this, which I don't recommend it, but sometimes it makes sense. So if I put this together, you will see that if the number here, if it's a 1, or if it's an even number, basically that's all. This is what it's saying. This is an even number, right? Divisible by 2 is an even number. Then this will be run, and you will get this message. So if it's a 1 or even number, you get that. If it's a 2, then yeah, it's going to run here. So that means this 2 will never get executed because this is already true. Okay. If it's a 3, then this will be skipped, and 3 will be matched to our number here. If it's a 4, again, so in this case, you can see that all the even numbers will be ignored down here. So 2, 4, if you get a different number, like you know, all the even numbers, basically, I think probably including 0. So those will be skipped. Okay, so save that, and down in terminal, clear my screen. Again, if I just run it, you see that it has higher, which is this one here, because the guess number is 2, and 2 is divisible by 2, you get even, so I did not get this little higher message here. Okay, again, if I put 4, this will be ignored because it will never reach this part here because it's already true here. Okay, so save that, go down here, I should get higher just like the previous one. Okay, so this is kind of odd to do it, but you can do this in PHP, and so you know, sometimes it's good to do it, but usually, again, like I mentioned, you would actually match this number or this value against the actual values down here. Okay, so kind of be careful when you do this, because sometimes you just causing more, I guess, trouble for yourself. So be careful. And so I mentioned a little while ago that PHP is a loosely typed language. That means these values can be of any type. Okay, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, sometimes it does. So it depends how you do it. So for example, if let's just say these, I'm going to put this back to what it was before. Okay, it's really confusing. So I'm going to put back to 1, and we'll just make this into a single statement. So single line is much cleaner. Okay, so I'll leave this as it. It's all integers, so we know those are correct. Let's just say that because again, like so for example, I can just say case, apple. I could do that. Okay, and it will still work because again, PHP doesn't care the type. So oops, it's a fruit, right? Something like that. And then when you put guess number is equal to apple, happen to be apple, then you'll see that even though this is a string, these are all numbers, it should still work because the data type is dynamic inside PHP. So you can see that, oops, it's a fruit. Okay. What if you want to make sure that all these numbers must be an integer type only to match your cases here? Otherwise, like in apple, it doesn't make sense. Okay, so in order for that to work, you have to check this guess number to make sure it is a integer. Otherwise, you should not run it. Right. So before you even run here, you want to test it first. So we learned in the previous video about the if statements. You can say if the guess number, right? You can say if the get type of the number is equal to integer. Okay, if it's that integer type, then and only then will you run the switch statements. Okay, so as you can see, my IDE automatically puts it into a multi-line here. So if it's a number, if the type is an integer, then go ahead and switch this. Otherwise, maybe down here you might have an else block saying message something like invalid number or input, right? And try again. So in this case, because I'm using apple as a string and not a number, I should get an error and I should get the message saying invalid number or invalid input. Okay, so let's save that and go down here and clear my console. And I'm going to run the statement. You'll see that it says it's invalid input because it does not match the integer type. Okay, so now if I put back to a a 2, okay, so let's save that, and down here if I run it again, so now you see that it's back to normal, like a little higher, because the 2 matches 2, you get a little higher. Okay, so this is really useful if you want to check to make sure you get the correct type to validate your case statements in here. Otherwise, it may not make sense at all. So this is very handy to use to check the type.